Hi everyone, welcome to Mindgasms, and I am, for the purposes of this chat, Andrew Postmodern Mindgasms, and as you can see, I'm doing one of my many criticisms of Jordan Peterson that I do a lot, and as you can see, I'm going to go through some of the stuff that he recently did that's a bunch of intellectual laziness and irresponsibility, in my opinion, that he does kind of often. So his recent tweet about ivermectin, uh, promoting the supposed effectiveness of it as against treating against the Decepticons, and how the author of that study tweeted at him, which was ignored, saying that's wrong. Also, Bill C-67, which Jordan Peterson recently made a video about, and I'm going to go over that and the various claims and correct what he says about the schools of philosophy that he always strawmans because he hasn't actually read books by those people, such as critical race theory, postmodernism, critical theory, and Marxism. And I'm going to talk about his video on Bill not Bill C-67, Bill 67, which he sees as basically the sequel to Bill C-16, which is the one that he first became famous for when when he first became famous, and talk about whether that bill actually passed, and in relation to Bill C-60 or Bill 67 rather itself, and what that means exactly and what it actually says in comparison to what he claims that it says, and what it actually means in comparison to what he claims that it means. Okay, so first of all, let's go through the ivermectin stuff here. So I'm going to go to the screenshots of tweets that I have here about his tweets on ivermectin that recently happened. So we'll go to this one first. Okay, so this is his original tweet, Jordan Peterson's tweet. This should be a bombshell. Treatment with ivermectin is associated with decreased mortality in COVID compared to remdesivir. Okay, so there's that one. And then there's another tweet. They're two different, showing it two different ways, because if you search for it, Jordan Peterson ivermectin tweet, or Jordan Peterson ivermectin tweet corrected by author, it takes you to the name of the author and his original response to Jordan Peterson's tweet correcting what Jordan Peterson said, which went ignored. So there's this one here. Right after the original tweet, I'll scroll up, see the original tweet. There should be a bombshell treatment of COVID, treatment of ivermectin against COVID in comparison to remdesivir. Hi, Dr. Peterson, first author of the paper. I think the information and data is being crudely misrepresented and misinterpreted. This is an abstract, not peer-reviewed, from a conference I presented at. We did not submit the manuscript for a reason, weak evidence. Okay, so the first author of the paper itself tweeted at Jordan Peterson that I am the first author of the study. This is not peer reviewed. It was an abstract. It was not submitted. So, so well, basically, if you look at, oh, someone else on Twitter has highlighted the key parts here. So check this out for yourself too. I'm showing you the screenshot here. It's easy to find, but check it out for yourself too. It's on Jordan Peterson's Twitter, and if you just search Twitter, see here the first one of the first responses. First author of the paper, crudely misrepresented and misinterpreted, not peer-reviewed, did not submit the manuscript for reason, weak evidence. So Jordan Peterson is, again, going around spreading misinformation saying that ivermectin is effective for treating COVID, which it actually isn't. And the author of the study itself corrected Jordan Peterson and said that it was not peer reviewed, it was an abstract. It didn't even actually get done. So Jordan Peterson and the regular people who spread misinformation about the Decepticons, like Dr. Peter Corey, have been going out and saying, "Hey, see, look, this study shows that ivermectin will defeat the Decepticons." Okay, so yeah, you should all just take ivermectin. Those vaxes don't. That's I don't know about those. I don't know. Maybe the ivermectin's better. And to be fair, I'm obviously ivermectin is not fucking horse medicine. That stupid smear of Joe Rogan is fucking stupid too. But in terms of human ivermectin, which is what was measured in this study, it was not effective. Okay? So and millions of people have been just jumping on the bandwagon about this fucking massive misinformation. Now, people who follow my channel know that I've been vaccinated twice, but I'm against vaccine mandates. So if people don't want to get vaccinated, they shouldn't fucking get vaccinated. But that doesn't mean that you should spread around a bunch of misinformation and bullshit about science. So that's fucking stupid. Okay, so now to get to Bill C-16, which is how Jordan Peterson became famous in the first place, right? It was him protesting, uh, pro basically being required through the what he calls compelled speech, rather, to be forced to refer to a transgender person by their chosen pronoun, even if it's not one that conforms with their gender or their biological sex. So the bill was introduced by Justin Trudeau's Liberal government on May 17, 2016. It passed in the House of Commons by 248 to 40 votes and in the Senate by 67 to 11 votes with 3 abstentions. The bill became law upon receiving royal assent. So, but what he didn't mention, though, is that this isn't a federal bill, it's a provincial bill, and I'm talking about Bill 16 C-16 still here. And it's become a part of the larger conversation. It's been instituted into law. So all it did, look, it added the words gender identity expression in three places to do with gender pronoun use, freedom of speech, and the rights of transgender and gender diverse Canadians. Okay, so if Jordan Peterson was actually right about this being a federally mandated thing that everyone in Canada had to do that, then I would have been really. That's why I was way more concerned at first, because I thought that's what the case was. But it's actually just for professors at his university in Ontario. It's not for everyone in Canada. Okay, so his recent video, and then we'll go through the video and address the bullshit he says about philosophy there too. So let's go to Bill C-67. That's the video. That's the bill that was recently introduced that he was talking about on his channel. Okay, so Bill C6 or Bill 67, I keep confusing them. Bill 67, Racial Equity in this Education System Act 2022. So this one is against race rather than gender, of course, right? So that doesn't that on the face of it, just remember that doesn't have anything to do with trans stuff. So if he says that doesn't make sense. So I'm just going to read the first paragraph here because it's really long in legal language. A number of amendments are made to the Education Act, new subsection 110-1(3) of the Act is amended to require the minister to direct a board to develop its anti-racism accountability report if, in the opinion of the minister, there is indication that the board's new teacher induction program does not include anti-racism and racial equity training. Okay, so anti-racism and racial equity training. I don't need to read the rest of it there. You get the point. So, but basically, what it gets into on here is that what Jordan Peterson doesn't mention is, or wait, no, sorry. He does mention this in the video, that this is an Ontario provincial bill. He says that himself. And so he assumes that this means that this is going to happen all throughout Canada, that all throughout Canada, everywhere, everyone everywhere will be required to take racial sensitivity training or that kind of shit. And that's a fucking ridiculously fucking stupid slope argument. There's no reason to think that's going to happen, especially in the more conservative provinces like Alberta, where I live and where Jordan Peterson is from. So he should know that that sort of shit is never going to happen in Alberta, especially since we have a conservative government right now and they're pretty extremely against all this wokeness shit. So it's not going to become a fucking federal law. So he's just going on his YouTube channel screaming with paranoia about a bunch of shit while misinforming people about what he says the relevant philosophy is behind this. So what this philosophy is behind this is anti-racism, nothing else. He's going to list a whole bunch of other philosophical schools here, and I'm going to stop and correct what he says about this. So I'll screen share this here, and I'm going to comment on it as it goes. Okay, let me. Okay.
Everyone, you may remember a few years ago, 2016, in the fall to be precise, that I recorded a video alerting people to what I saw as the dangers of a bill C-16 that I regarded as an attempt to make compelled speech mandatory in Canada. Many of you watching this will.
Okay, so already he says in Canada. He doesn't say where in Canada. He just says Canada in general, which doesn't necessarily mean all of Canada, but he doesn't specify yet.
Be familiar with the events that transpired in consequence. Unfortunately, I feel compelled to do something similar today in a variety of different
He feels
ways in
compelled.
relationship to another bill, a provincial one this time, Bill 67, which purports to address racist issues in the entire Ontario education system. I'm going to read something
He looks more
that I
stoned
wrote
than
about
me,
this
doesn't he?
as a warning. A warning to citizens of Ontario and Canada. Bill 67, which purports
not Ontario and Canada, just Ontario,
to be nothing but an anti-racist bill, is in fact the most pernicious and dangerous piece of legislation that any Canadian government has attempted to put forward.
The most dangerous and pernicious that any government has attempted to put forward. You think he's being a bit fucking hyperbolic here, like he loves to fucking do all the time?
And I hope I'm not saying that lightly. It will make mandatory the subversion of the entire education system in Ontario, K-12, as well as colleges and universities, to the radically leftist doctrines known as critical theory, a thoroughly anti-Western ideology.
Okay, so critical theory is not radically anti-leftist. They're critical of they're basically, they are kind of anti-enlightenment and anti-capitalist, though. Basically, the Frankfurt School and critical theory like Horkheimer, Adorno, Marcuse, etc., they're very anti-capitalist, and some of them, they don't all agree about this, which is important to remember, but some of them think that the Enlightenment was a mistake.
Both postmodern and Marxist in its derivation.
Okay, so postmodern and Marxist in its derivation. It's neither postmodern, it's neither postmodern nor Marxist. My phone is ringing. The Frankfurt School is not exactly traditional Marxism, and it's not postmodernism. Postmodernism itself has absolutely nothing to do with critical theory. Postmodernists who Jordan Peterson has strawman before, like Foucault and Derrida, uh, are they have nothing to do with critical theory. They were skeptical of Enlightenment institutions in the modern era, like like religion and science and government and those sorts of things, but they did not think that the Enlightenment was a mistake, and they did not want to overturn the Enlightenment or some shit like that. That's an important thing to remember that Jordan Peterson never fucking mentions, because he has not read any books by Derrida or Foucault or Marcuse or Horkheimer or Adorno, because if he did, he would know the difference that Foucault and Derrida and so-called postmodernists who were actually post-structuralists were critical of the Enlightenment, but they didn't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater. They were not anti-Enlightenment. And some of the critical theorists were more like that. Now, even the classical Marxists, though, the difference between the classical Marxists and the critical theorists of the Frankfurt School is that their Marxism was just mostly talking about how capitalism is bad, and or sorry, the classic Marxists just basically say capitalism bad, it causes a bunch of oppression and shit like that. Even Marx himself didn't necessarily advocate for revolution, but some Marxists did, and the Frankfurt School people were way more fucking radical than traditional Marxists in that way.
Based on the idea that all our extant institutions are racist, sexist, and discriminatory in their essence.
Okay, so nowhere in the bill does it say. Go read it yourself. It's Bill 67 Canada. Look it up. I showed you a little bit of it there. They're that they're racist and sexist and all this kind of shit in their essence. It doesn't say that. I read the fucking bill. It's long ass shit. It's boring shit. It's stupid, boring legal language, but it doesn't say that they're racist and sexist and transphobic or some shit like that in their essence. All they talk about is race. This is another difference between the Frankfurt School and anti-racism and racial equity and that sort of thing, and critical race theorists. Critical race theorists, unlike the critical theorists, focus on race. Critical theorists focus on class. Marxists focus on class. They don't particularly care about race. Classic Marxists. They don't particularly care about race. And none of these people, the critical theorists, the critical race theorists, the postmodernists, none of them talk about sexism. That's feminism. Feminists are a totally different school of thought from postmodernists and critical theorists and critical race theorists and anti-racists. These are all very different categories that sometimes have some similarities between some of them. Okay, so I'll try to not take forever with this.
Critical theorists assume that history is best understood as the war between identity groups, with one group always oppressing.
No, that's not true. Critical theorists see all of history as a war between oppressed identity groups. They talk about particularly the problems of fascism in the 20th century, like the dialectic of Enlightenment by Adorno and Horkheimer, for example, talks about how the Enlightenment was a mistake, which is fucking radical. But they focus mainly, and Marcuse does too, in One Dimensional Man, and all of the authors, well, maybe not all of them, but all of the ones that I've read, focus on how fascism in the 20th century, by which they include the Nazis as well, of course, is the aesthetics of it is attached to capitalism, and capitalism is attached to fascism, which is a huge logical leap. But they're not talking about identity categories. They don't say jack shit about identity categories. They're just talking about from more of a Marxist perspective, right? Poor people get oppressed by rich people. That's all there is to it. There's nothing about identity categories here. These are conflating two totally different things.
And all other groups always victimized and exploited. Critical theorists dismiss the idea of the sovereign free individual, claiming that belief in such
Okay, that's don't believe in the sovereign free individual. You can't find any book by any critical theorist that says we do not believe in the sovereign free individual.
Sovereignty and freedom does nothing but justify the oppression and exploitation of the marginalized. In keeping with that,
That part might be true because they are still very anti-individualist, but they agree that the individual does exist. But I think that it's probably fairly accurate that they would say that seeing yourself as an individual is a way of oppressing you because it separates you from other people or some sort of justification like that. So that part might be correct.
that rejection, such theorists assume that human identity itself is best understood at the group level with markers
Okay,
of
so
race.
that's not true. They don't say that human identity itself is best understood at the group level. Again, go find any critical race theorist who says that because they don't.
Sex, so-called gender, and sexual preference dominating.
Okay, so
Critical
that's not true either. Sex and sex preference and gender, those are not dominating anywhere in critical theory. Critical theorists don't fucking talk about gender and sex and all this shit. That's just total bullshit that he's lumping in there.
theorists reject the presumption of individual innocence absent proof of wrongdoing, assuming that membership in a group regarded as dominant and exploitative is sufficient to indicate the moral culpability of any given member of that group.
So that's not true either. Again, go find any critical theorist in any of their books who say that simple membership of a group means that you are morally culpable for that group. They don't say they don't believe in individuality. They don't say they don't believe in free will. You can't believe in choices. They're just total determinists that capitalism is going to destroy everything, and if you're with the bad guy Nazis or fascists, then then you're basically just as bad as them. They don't say that sort of shit. They are pretty fucking radical, but they don't completely throw out the idea of the individual and moral culpability as Peterson is claiming falsely here.
Critical theorists define offense and harm as subjectively determined. Anyone who feels
Those are subjectively determined. How is that not? They're not objectively determined. Your pain and harm, those pain and harm mean different things to different people. That's why some people are into BDSM and literally derive sexual pleasure from pain. That's true.
victimized by any statement made by anyone for any reason is fully justified in their feeling and claim of harm, regardless of the intent of the author of the statement, who is then to be deemed guilty of such victimization and
Okay,
denied.
again, no critical theorist says if an author makes you feel bad, then they are responsible for you feeling bad. Again, go find any fucking critical theorist who writes this. They don't. That you can't find them. They don't exist.
Even the opportunity for a reasonable defense. Bill 67 will mandate the creation of institutions of inquisition in every educational institution, to which anyone who has an opinion or undertakes an action that is perceived to violate the tenets of critical theory will be
Okay,
made.
again, there are no tenets of critical theory. They're just critical, really fucking critical of the Enlightenment, and they really don't like capitalism. There are no tenets that they adhere to. They disagree with each other about different levels of authoritarianism and revolution and violence and all that sort of shit. There are no tenets that they adhere to. Go find any tenets that any critical theorists rather say are tenets.
Made necessarily subject to punishment. The author of this bill, MPP Laura May Lindo, NDP, Kitchener Center, is former head of equity at Laurier University. It was Laura May Lindo who developed the policies that resulted in the circumstances that enveloped Lindsay Shepherd in 2017, which produced a scandal provincially, nationally, and internationally, left a permanent stain
Okay,
on.
so for those of you who don't know, you probably all do. Lindsay Shepherd got in trouble for showing a clip of Jordan Peterson in your class, which I agree that's pretty fucked up. But he, again, as Jordan Peterson always did, attach this to the evil postmodern neo-Marxists, which are not even a thing and don't exist because postmodernists and Marxists are inherently in opposition to each other.
On Canadian universities, on the reputation of Canadian universities, and demolished that young woman's academic ambitions and future. The fact that the Ontario Conservative government has allowed and even encouraged such legislation to be put forward under their aegis, and then ignorant and careless enough to vote in.
Okay, again, Ontario government is under provincial Conservative control, but Justin Trudeau is the Liberal Prime Minister and federal leader of the country. And again, in really conservative provinces and really conservative-led provinces like here in Alberta and often in Quebec, this sort of thing is not going to fly with them. I don't bet on things, but I would bet on that.
In support of it is a woeful indication of both the perniciousness and deviance of the ideas that the legislation contains.
Deviance of the ideas. He doesn't like these ideas, therefore they're deviant. They're deviant, man. They're evil.
And evidence of their own, the Conservatives' own stunning and continued inability to see the danger such doctrines present.
Okay, these doctrines, because even though they're not doctrines, there are no critical theorist doctrines. And again, critical theory has nothing to do with fucking race, which is all that he's talking about. He's this whole video, he's attaching critical theory to anti-racism, which are two completely different things. Anti-racism focuses on race. Critical theorists focus on class and capitalism and the Enlightenment. But to be fair, though, the conservative leadership of the federal Conservative Party has been very bad lately because they keep switching leaders. But in terms of the provincial Conservative leadership, I don't really know. But yeah, anyway.
It is much harder to actually deal with the fact of the sometimes unjust distribution of privileges and resources in a complex society than to kowtow to radicals who know how to viciously accuse, weaponize guilt, and claim through manipulative sloganeering the moral upper.
Okay, so now he's saying they're being manipulative, implying that they're being dishonest. So, like, these woke people, some of them are grifters maybe, but he's basically implying that they're grifters. And most of these woke people are just fucking, like, batshit crazy, and they genuinely believe this shit. They're not trying to be manipulative, they're just trying to do what they see as the right thing, which might not be the same case to the rest of us, but that doesn't mean that they're being manipulative.
Hand. But there's no excuse for the conservatives and for the classical liberals who also believe in the sovereignty of the individual to trumpet their
Again, the critical theorists still believe in the sovereignty of the individual. They just don't put it at the top of their value hierarchy, as Jordan Peterson would say. They're very critical of the Western conception of the individual that has been created in the Enlightenment and has been normalized to the point where everyone sees that as totally normal, even though it's actually a historically very recent thing, the Western conception of the individual that Jordan Peterson touts so much.
Passion for the oppressed by allowing authoritarian ideologues to gain their treacherous way. This bill, 67, threatens the integrity of all the systems that will educate all the young people in Ontario for decades to come.
Okay, it threatens the integrity of all the educational institutions that will come for all people, all students being educated in the Ontario school system for decades to come. That's a fucking massively hyperbolic claim. This bill hasn't even fucking passed yet. It's just been proposed, and he's claiming that it's going to affect the school system for decades to come. That's complete fucking bullshit. It's not even a fucking guarantee that it's going to pass. And if it does, there's no guarantee that it'll last for decades. And again, there's no guarantee that it's going to go federal too. One province doesn't mean jack shit in comparison to all of the other provinces and in terms of whether it'll be a federal bill. So again, he's being hyperbolic as fuck, as he usually is.
It passes, the rest of the provinces in Canada will follow suit. The fact that this bill is already through second reading is inexcusable.
Reading hasn't been passed yet.
Wake up, Canadians, before you do yourself and your children irreparable harm.
Okay, that's just, come on, man. He needs to stop this fucking, get off my lawn, you goddamn fucking Gen Zers. I don't like you with your equity and shit. I agree that you shouldn't like mandate speech, and I don't think that gender like racial sensitivity training it has been proven to be effective. It's been proven in scientific studies to be ineffective, if I understand correctly, actually. But that that doesn't mean that this bill that has been proposed is even going to pass. And if it does pass, it doesn't mean, since it's a provincial bill, that it will pass in other provinces or become a federal bill. And again, he keeps talking about critical theory throughout this, which has fucking nothing to do with anti-racism training. And again, anti-racism, it's not critical race theory as James Lindsay claims that it is all the time, because critical race theorists talk about race, critical theorists talk about class, capitalism, and the Enlightenment. And Marxists, again, critical theorists in the Frankfurt School are a type of Marxist, but they're a newer type of Marxist, and they're very different from the classical Marxists in that they're more radical, and the critical theorists think that the Enlightenment was a mistake. But that doesn't mean that they're even similar to the anti-racists. And anti-racists themselves, like Ivermectin Kennedy, said that he's not a critical race theorist, he's an anti-race theorist, and he hasn't even read critical race theory. And critical race theorists differentiate themselves from anti-racists like Ivermectin Kennedy, and Robin DiAngelo and Ta-Nehisi Coates all the time. And again, Jordan Peterson just had to fucking mention postmodernism, even though, like I said, Foucault and Derrida and the so-called postmodernists who were actually post-structuralists had absolutely fucking nothing to do with the fucking Frankfurt School. This is just complete fucking bullshit. The so-called postmodernists who were actually post-structuralists were, again, they were critical of institutions of the Enlightenment like science, religion, and government, but they didn't think the Enlightenment was a mistake. And again, critical theorists, Adorno and Horkheimer in The Dialectic of Enlightenment said that the Enlightenment was fundamentally a mistake because it's fundamentally anti-Semitic to its core. So that's pretty fucking radical. Foucault and Derrida were nowhere near that fucking radical. They're totally different. So postmodernism is different from Marxism. Marxism is different from critical theory in the Frankfurt School, and critical theory in the Frankfurt School is different from critical race theory, which is also different from all of those, which is also different from anti-racism. The only thing in this bill is anti-racism. There's no postmodernism, there's no Marxism, there's there's no critical race theory. There's nothing else other than anti-racism, and his main target throughout the video is critical theory. He doesn't even say critical race theory, which is closer to anti-racism than critical race theory is, uh, but or than critical theory is rather. But he didn't even fucking come close. He's talking about people who make a class-based criticism and criticize capitalism and the Enlightenment. He's conflating that with an entirely different school of thought who are anti-racist and talk about racial equity and shit like that all the time. So yeah, anyway, I did this deep dive into several things, mainly the Bill 67 that Jordan Peterson has been talking about lately, and his intellectual laziness in terms of that ivermectin study that was corrected by the author, and Bill C-16, and whether Bill 67 will even get passed. And he's being super fucking hyperbolic about that and conflating all of these intellectual philosophical categories because he doesn't know what the fuck he's talking about in terms of this. Again, I don't criticize him as much as some people do. I don't think he's like racist or white supremacist or out to hurt people or anything like that. I think he has good intentions and he's helped a lot of people, and I like his more technical book Maps of Meaning, but I don't like his self-help stuff and his obsession with Christianity lately. And he doesn't fucking read the philosophers he talks about, quite obviously, which just annoys me because I'm a huge fan of philosophy. So he's demonizing schools of thought that I think are interesting, regardless of how much I agree or disagree with them. I like postmodernists the most, but the rest of them I could take or leave, and I'm not really a big fan of any of them. But he's conflating all of these fucking philosophical schools of thought together, as he always does. Anyway, I'm sure, since this is my hobby horse, I'll keep on track with this Bill 67 and see what happens with it. Who knows? Maybe the hyperbolic negative outcome as he thinks it will actually happen. Hopefully that's not the fucking case. But yeah, as of right now, he's just a fucking crazy ranting old man on this subject as usual. All right, so yeah, don't listen to Jordan Peterson about ivermectin, Bill 67, Marxism, postmodernism, critical theory, critical race theory, or anti-racism. Research these things yourself. Read books. He doesn't read books. He reads books clearly, but he doesn't read books about these things that he criticizes all the time. If you're going to criticize people, read their books. I've read all of his books. He hasn't read anything by Foucault or Derrida or Adorno or Horkheimer or Marcuse. He might have read something by Ibram X. Kennedy or Robert DiAngelo because they're easy to understand. And I'm not saying that he's dumb. I didn't mean to say that. He's clearly smart. Read Maps of Meaning. That's a fucking intelligent book. But yeah, he's spreading a whole bunch of stupid bullshit, misinformation, and strawmanning philosophy and getting scientific research wrong and being paranoid about a legal bill that probably won't amount to much. So yeah, I just felt like I wanted to do some more of my hobby horse of criticizing Jordan Peterson. Hope you liked that detailed debunking of bullshit that he's been talking about lately. And like I always say, thanks to everyone for watching this. Share it everywhere. Click that like button. Subscribe to the channel. Click the bell to be notified when I come out with new videos. Going to do a podcast with Ben Burgess soon on anarcho-capitalists, never mentioning the anti-capitalist history of Marxists like uh, Bakunin and Kropotkin, also the philosophical tautologies and faith claims of Austrian economists such as Hans Hermann Hoppe and von Mises, and also the philosopher Alexander Dugin, who sounds kind of like a postmodern conservative and is a really popular Russian philosopher who has had a debatable influence on Vladimir Putin, and he's been labeled as a right-wing reactionary and a fascist by lefties like Ben Burgess, so that'll be interesting to talk about. And then also this weekend, probably going to talk about that new information about the Hunter Biden laptop being confirmed as real by the New York Times. Going to do a podcast about that with Chris and Dusty. And yeah, like I always say, I love you all. Keep being the tiny beam of light that shines through the almost impenetrable darkness in the universe. And most importantly, always remember this: the funk cures all, and groove is in the heart. And uh, ask questions and research claims that public intellectuals make because they're fucking wrong about a lot of what they say and they're irresponsible with their audience and don't research things enough. I like to actually read up on things and try to research, and don't be a conspiracy theorist. Don't listen to Jordan Peterson. Don't listen to me. Research things more yourself. And yeah, Jordan Peterson, he's not a bad guy. I think he has good intentions, but he makes a whole bunch of fucking stupid, intellectually lazy claims that he doesn't research, which is irresponsible. And yeah, thanks again, everyone, for watching, and adios until next time.